Leo Taxel. I was wondering about Scientology's tax-exempt status. You always hear that if Scientology lost its tax-exempt status in the U.S., that it would pretty much be game over for them, yet it seems like in 90% of the countries they operate in around the world, they are not recognized as a religion and don't get tax breaks. If being tax-exempt here is such an issue, how is that not a hindering factor for them everywhere else? Do they funnel all the money from Europe, South America, and elsewhere to the safety of the American tax shelter? Do they enjoy tax exemption anywhere else or just the U.S.? Would losing it truly end them or just really hurt them? Okay, so yeah, tax exemption. This is a big issue for Scientology. Scientology has always been primarily a U.S.-based religion or religious activity, or at least as far as it was founded in the United States. Hubbard was obviously an American, and pretty shortly after the whole thing got going, he started considering setting up a base of operations over in the United Kingdom because, of course, almost from day one, people were questioning him and calling him out, and with Dianetics, and he was having to hop, skip, and jump around in order to avoid some of that attention from government authorities and things like that. Once they got tax exemption, things chilled quite a bit, and also he had help organizationally in setting things up. So no, they're not. They're not tax exempt in a lot of places. They are tax exempt in some places outside of the United States. I can't remember right now off the top of my head which ones those are, but I do know that they do have tax exemption or religious recognition in other countries than just the United States. But the thing, regardless of any of that, France they don't, Germany they certainly don't, Belgium I don't believe they do, the United Kingdom they've never been able to get tax exemption or full religious recognition there, although they can now do weddings and things like that. But we have to remember that it has always been and will always be a U.S.-based operation. That is where the international management is. That is where the largest Church of Scientology, the flag service organization in Clearwater, is based, and it's always going to be in the United States, because the United States is where they enjoy not just tax exemption, but First Amendment protection under the freedom of religion. And that gives them legal, as I've discussed before, legal carte blanche to harass their critics, to be able to say and do just about anything they want when they decide to target somebody. And that has been, the United States affords them a lot of protection for that. So that's why it's so important that they maintain that tax-exempt status, because if they don't, they won't lose the First Amendment protections, the freedom of religion protection, or religious recognition, automatically if they lose tax exemption. But on the other hand, if they lose tax exemption in the United States, this opens the door to all kinds of taxes, property taxes, employment taxes, things like that. And the idea of having all of their employees, now being volunteers, and so they don't have to pay them a minimum wage and things like that. I believe that would also be called into question if they were to lose their tax-exempt status, their 501c3, protection. The property taxes alone would be a major hit on Scientology, especially in the United States, where they have more churches than I think they do in the rest of the world. Between the flag organization, between the Los Angeles organization, and all of the local churches and properties that they own, and the international headquarters and all that, tremendous amount of property in the United States. And all of that suddenly, subject to property taxes, oh man. And also, of course, the PR hit. Because if Scientology loses its tax exemption, everybody's going to know, yeah, it's a religion, sure. I mean, they do that right now and they roll their eyes, and yet they're frustrated at the fact that the IRS grants them that exemption. So they sort of are forced to acknowledge that it's a religion. And of course, they have religious scholars and, apologists and all this sort of thing backing them up. Well, the IRS recognition gives them a lot of cred. in that direction. So you asked if all the other countries are sending their money to the United States for tax shelter purposes. Yeah, absolutely they are. There's a statistic called payments to flag that every single Church of Scientology keeps. And it shows how much money every week, which is a percentage of their income taken right off the top, goes to church management. In other words, straight up to international headquarters. Now that money doesn't, I don't know where it's kept in terms of what bank it's kept in. Maybe it's, Caymans, maybe there's tax shelters offshore, that sort of thing. Well, there definitely are. I also understand that the International Association of Scientologists has money, maybe over in England as well as in the, offshore accounts and whatnot, as well as in the United States. So there's, this big pot of money is not all sitting in one bank account. It is definitely spread around. They also have investments. They do stock investments and things like that with the money in order to get their money making money. So that's all very definitely controlled from the United States and protected in the United States because they're a tax-exempt organization. So it serves, as I understand it, it serves their interests for all that money to come to the U.S. That was one of the big problems Russia had with Scientology, is they're sending money to the United States. And they're like, what is this? So, rightly so, right? Russia's asking all the right questions and coming to all the right conclusions. But like I said in my video about Russia, I don't think the way they're going about trying to smash Scientology out of existence is the right way to go. So, so would it truly end them if they lost tax-exempt status? No, it wouldn't. Scientology could keep going. They certainly have enough money set aside in their reserves to pay those property tax amounts, at least for a few years, and it wouldn't wipe them out right away. But it would be the first in what would be a chain reaction of events that I believe would eventually wipe them out. Because losing that tax exemption, I think it would open them up to some other cases of a legal nature that might start piercing the corporate veil and calling into question some of their practices. And like I said, I'm not sure, I'm not 100% at all as to whether their employee payment system would then be called into question or not, or could be vulnerable, right? Because if they had to start paying all their church volunteers a minimum wage and paying taxes on that, and also overtime and all that sort of thing, right? That would be a big hassle for Scientology. So I think it would open the door to those things, regardless of whether it did or not. The PR blow alone, the public relations problem that would create, would be gigantic. And of course, if they lose tax-exempt status in the U.S., they're probably going to lose tax-exempt status in the other countries where they have it, and really convert over straight up to a business model. But again, it's all kind of up in the air as to what would actually happen. This is all just supposition on my part. But I'm quite positive that losing tax exemption would be the beginning of the real end for organized Scientology.